It is now my pleasure to introduce Angular developer and bovine aficionado Mark Thompson. Mark has been migrating Angular applications to the latest version since AngularJS and is a fanboy for RxJS, NGRX, NX, and Ionic. Man, that's a lot of letters you just made me read. He has created various real-time interactive web experiences, ranging from online concerts to modern technology showcasing Fire-based services, and he likes watching YouTube videos about math and gaming, playing chess, and cooking. Mark, come up on stage and take it away.
So yes, as Andrew said, my name is Mark. I really like Angular. Always excited for the latest version, and I'm super excited to talk about strictly typed reactive forms, which will be coming in the next upgrade. Now, to talk about the new strict types for the reactive forms, we're going to talk about the reactive forms API, why we need strict types, what are those strict types, and then we're going to go over some common gotchas. But first, what is RFC? Is it reactive form controls? Really fierce code? React fried chicken? No, it's request for comments. A request for comments is a proposal for change. Typically includes a prototype, examples, explanations, and serves as a public forum and is community driven. Okay, so to go into the strict types, we're going to have to understand a little bit about the reactive forms API itself. When it comes to Angular and forms, there are two types of approaches. There is template-driven forms, and then there is reactive forms. Template-driven forms are simple, are made for simple forms and are fairly straightforward to use, while reactive forms is a bit more robust and testable. Here you can see I have a component and I have a property favorite color, which I am setting to a form control, and I am defaulting its value to blue. In my template, you can see I am binding that favorite color to my input using the form control directive. By doing so, the form control will then update my view, and as my view is being updated, as my user interacts with it, it will notify the form control, and that is the model to view, view to model data flow. Now, to understand Angular forms, you have to understand the three fundamental building blocks. There is the form control, form group, and form array. We talked a bit about form control, but let's also talk about form group, which is a record-like collection of form controls. And we also have a form array, which is an array, represents an array of form controls. Side note, each of these interfaces extend the abstract class abstract control, and this will become important later on. Okay, so let's show an example of how to use a form group. In my component, I am creating a colors form. This will be my form group, and I'm initializing it with two form controls. It's important to note that when you initialize a form group, each of the properties will serve as a form control name. I have two. One is favorite and least favorite. Favorite is being defaulted to blue. Least favorite is being defaulted to yellow. In my template, I can bind my form group to my form using the form group directive. And each of the inputs can pick up which form control they're supposed to use by binding the form control's name using the form control name directive. As I am interacting with the form, you can see that the value of the form group is changing. Yes. All right, next up we have form array. Form array is a bit more complex to use, mainly because there is not a form array directive. So you have to first create a form group. And then for the child form controls of that form group, you can throw in a form array. One thing cool to note about form arrays is that they're convenient when it comes to dynamically adding and removing them, as you can see in the animation. Alrighty, So now that we got a taste of what the Reactive Forms API is, let's talk about why it needs strict types. First off, the API is tricky. So we talked about form groups, and we talked about the value that it has. Based off of interacting with the form, you would guess that maybe the value of the form group is an object with property favorite and least favorite, and these will have string values, and they will change as I interact with the form. But it gets a little bit more muddy because if I disable one of the form controls, uh, their value will now be excluded from the form group. It gets even more confusing because if you disable all the form controls of a form group, now the form group will have all the values of the form groups all over again. This is because when all of the child form controls of a form group is disabled, the form group is also now considered disabled. So now its value will be all of the disabled form controls. So maybe we'll update our guess to it's an object with properties favorite and least favorite, which will be optional strings, which is almost correct because you can also reset a form control using the reset method. And whenever you reset a form control, its value becomes null. So maybe its value is an object with property favorite, least favorite, which is an optional string and can be nullish. Another reason why we need strict types is because everything is an abstract control. What do I mean by this? When trying to access the child form controls of your form group or form array, you can do this using the controls property. But when you do so, the types will assume that each of the child form controls are an abstract control. On top of this, TypeScript doesn't do a great job trying to protect you from trying to access child form controls that don't exist. It gets even worse when you're trying to use a child form control, which is a form array. You can see here I'm trying to access the properties and methods of my form array, but because TypeScript just thinks it's an abstract control, it doesn't know it has these, so I just get type errors. This is even worse because if I wanted to try to simplify my example of using a form array, I can't. Here I'm trying to bind its child form controls to the inputs using the form control directive, but unfortunately it believes that its child form controls are just abstract controls and not specifically a form control, so I again get a type error. And then the last reason, which is probably the biggest reason, is that the any type is evil. Because of several methods and properties of type any, for instance, set value, you can see here I'm passing just random values, and I am not getting a type error. It would be inferred that the value for favorite color should be a string. On top of this, because value is of type any, it has no idea what is allowed and what's not allowed. Okay, so we talked about why we need strict types, and now let's go into the upcoming strict types that will be in the upcoming upgrade. Before I get into that, I just want to make a note that everything about the show is backwards compatible. Long story short, the change to the Reactive Forms API is that all the interfaces will have generics. And if you don't like these strict types, or if you run into an issue, you can always pass the any type for your generic. But if you want to play the game, you can. You can simply pass a default value and it will infer what its type is. You can see here now it knows that it's going to be string or null. You can also specify this by just passing whatever type you think the value should be for your form control. Okay, so let's talk about the feature coming up as well. Now we have the initial value is default, which is going to be a new form control option. When you pass this, the reset behavior will change. As mentioned before, when you reset, it will set the value to null. But if you use this option, it will reset it back to its initial value. This is really convenient because now if I do this, I can eliminate null from my types completely, and that will simplify the confusion of the Reactive Forms API. All right, now let's talk about the form group and form array. For form groups, you can specify the types of its form controls. which can be a bit verbose looking. But it's important because again, you can have nested form arrays and form groups. So yeah. And similarly for form array, you can pass an array of form controls with a specific generic type, and this will specify the type of your form array. Okay. Now, why is this all important? This is important because improved types in a TypeScript project will improve development. Now that we have strict types, I won't run into issues trying to use set value. If I pass the wrong value, TypeScript will just let me know, and that will save time having to run into issues at runtime or during testing. Likewise, it will now protect me from trying to use child form controls that clearly don't exist. And if I want to access my form arrays and it is a child form control of a form group, I can freely do so. No more need for a type assertion, which is great. And I can finally simplify my template code. I can finally bind the child form controls of my form array directly to my inputs. No weird trickery or extra HTML needed. Okay, so that was really cool and lovely, but now let's talk about the gotchas. Form array generic doesn't support tuples. So here I'm going to try to assign the type for my form array. I'm going to try to use a tuple type and specify that the first form control is a string, but then the second form control has a value number. This unfortunately doesn't work now, but hopefully in an upcoming upgrade, they will support tuples. Another big issue is that form builder methods only return abstract control. What I mean by this is when you use the form builder, which is a common way to create form groups, because it typically results in less syntax, everything that you create using a form builder, their child form controls will always be abstract control. This will be annoying because then you're going to get a bunch of type errors trying to set up your properties for your component, since everything's abstract control and not specifically a form control. All right, and there are other issues as well involving template-driven forms. This RFC was purposely not trying to cover that. They just simply wanted to add more types. But feel free to skim over that, go to the RFC and check out the docs and explanations. And yeah, I will also be handing out resources. At the bottom is a link to a demo that uses the strict types. Feel free to fork it and check it out.